Welcome back to the glittering prisons of Victorian London. The engagement of Lord Wexley and Miss Ashcroft is official, and while society celebrates, the three people at the center of the spectacle are teetering on the edge of disaster. James is cold, tortured by his choice. Lydia is suspicious, her pride wounded by her fiancé's detachment. And Clara is running, desperate to protect her friend from the truth and herself from the man she cannot forget. In this next chapter, the tension becomes unbearable. A dangerous encounter threatens to expose the hidden love, forcing Clara to choose a path of total exile. But sometimes running away is the very thing that reveals the devastating truth. Prepare yourself, the friendship is about to be tested and the consequences will be explosive. Part 4, Chapter 4, Betrayal's Shadow. The engagement of Lord Wexley and Miss Ashcroft was precisely the spectacle Victorian society craved. The engagement between James and Lydia is announced. Society rejoices. The newspapers declared it the most fitting match of the decade. Lydia, radiant and utterly secure in her triumph, reveled in the deluge of compliments and gifts. She was closer than ever to achieving her goal to outshine the world. For Clara, the announcement cast a long, cold shadow over her life. She was forced to endure endless discussions of the wedding plans, the selection of the venue, and the detail of the bridesmaids' dresses, all the trappings of a happiness that should have been hers. She maintained her facade with an almost inhuman discipline, embodying the steady, selfless friend. Yet, the emotional closeness she once shared with Lydia began to feel strained, stretched thin by the massive secret she carried. Lydia, preoccupied with fittings and parties, was largely unaware of the silent chasm opening between them. However, James's subtle detachment was harder to ignore. He was the perfect fiancé in public, attentive, generous, and politically engaged. But in private moments, away from the immediate scrutiny of the crowd, the tension around him was palpable. He offered Lydia a deep loyalty and respect, but never the easy, joyous warmth she craved. Lydia, accustomed to effusive admiration, began to notice the small, unsettling things. James's sudden stiff posture whenever Clara entered the room, the too quick dismissal of Clara's name in conversation, or the way his eyes would track Clara's quiet movements when he thought no one was watching. "He is so serious, Clara," Lydia complained one afternoon while trying on her wedding veil. "Do you not think he is too serious? He rarely laughs, not truly. And sometimes he looks at me with that same brooding expression he wears when he discusses the Corn Laws." Clara, busy adjusting the lace on the veil, kept her gaze down. "He is Viscount Wexley, Lydia, a man of great responsibilities. He is not some frivolous boy to be constantly jesting." "No," Lydia mused, turning her face to catch the light. "But he seems to relax only when he is talking of something utterly dry, or when he is not looking at me." She stopped, her head tilted, studying Clara in the mirror. "And he is always very polite to you, almost excessively so. Is he perhaps bored? Does he find me too vivacious?" "He finds you dazzling," Clara said firmly, forcing genuine enthusiasm into her voice. "He is simply a man who hides his passion, dear. That is part of his charm." But Lydia's seed of suspicion had been planted. Her pride and vanity were pricked by the notion that James might find fault with her, and she began to scrutinize the interactions between the man she was to marry and her dearest friend with an increasing, possessive intensity. The shadow of betrayal was lengthening. The tension that had been carefully contained for weeks finally combusted during a private engagement party held at Lydia's home. The guests had dwindled, and the final moments were reserved for the families and the bridal party. Clara was charged with collecting a forgotten set of sheet music from the library, a quiet, isolated room on the ground floor. The air was cool, scented with old leather and beeswax. As she reached for the music on a high shelf, the library door opened silently, and James entered. He was unaware she was there until he was already halfway across the room, having evidently sought the same quiet refuge she had. He stopped dead when he saw her, the color draining from his face. "Clara," he murmured, his breath catching. "Lord Wexley," she responded, trying to resume her formal composure, though her voice trembled. She clutched the music sheets like a shield. "I was just leaving." "Wait," he commanded, his voice raw. He closed the door, a low, ominous thud that sealed them into their private, forbidden space. "We cannot be alone," Clara insisted, her pulse beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm. "Lydia will come seeking us." "Let her." James said, stepping closer. The careful control he had maintained for weeks had snapped. The guilt, the self-reproach, and the raw, forbidden yearning they had shared since their first glance overwhelmed him. I cannot do this anymore, Clara. I cannot face this wedding, knowing that every choice I have made is a lie. I look at her, and I see duty. I look at you, and I see everything I walked away from. Stop, she pleaded, retreating until her back pressed against the wall. He stopped directly in front of her, leaning in, blocking her escape. His hands came up, not to touch her, but to brace on the wall on either side of her head, caging her. His face was inches from hers, his eyes blazing with the conflict of the brooding hero torn between duty and desire. I am a coward, he repeated the confession from the garden, but this time it was an explanation for the impending, fatal mistake. And I cannot, for the life of me, choose duty 1 second longer. He lowered his head, his intention unmistakable, devastating. A dangerous near kiss between Clara and James threatens to expose them both. Their eyes met, and in that agonizing second, Clara saw her own despair mirrored in the dark blue depths of his. He was so close she could feel the heat of his breath, the faint, familiar scent of him, and every fiber of her being screamed for release, for the truth of that kiss. But the memory of Lydia's excited, innocent face, her triumphant joy, flashed before Clara's eyes. She twisted her head sharply, burying her face into her shoulder. No, James, I beg you. No. Do not ruin us all for a moment of shared, wicked regret. His muscles locked. He remained there for one long, trembling moment, his breath ragged against her hair. Then, with a sound that was half groan, half sob, he pushed himself back, stumbling away from her as if burned. Forgive me, he whispered, his back to her, like clutching the mantelpiece for support. God, forgive me. Clara did not wait for him to turn. She fled the library, the sheet music slipping from her nerveless fingers. She walked with mechanical precision back to her carriage, her heart racked with a paralyzing guilt. She had come within a breath of betraying her best friend, of demolishing the honor of her family, and of destroying James's entire future. The near kiss had been the breaking point. She knew now she could not trust herself or James to maintain the necessary decorum. The forbidden yearning was too volatile. Clara, racked with guilt, distances herself, determined not to betray her friend. The next day she fabricated a sudden illness for her mother, a pressing need for a change of air in the country, and abruptly announced their departure from London. She penned a brief, affectionate note to Lydia, citing the need for rest, but promising a quick return before the wedding. She ran not from James's presence, but from her own weakness. She was determined that no momentary lapse of passion would be allowed to shatter the life her dearest friend had so eagerly secured. The only way to protect her friendship was to remove herself entirely from James's orbit, retreating into the quiet, isolating safety of the countryside. She left behind the glitters and shadows of London, but she took with her the heavy, burning certainty that her heart was hopelessly, dangerously compromised. Part 5, Chapter 5, The Breaking Point. Clara's sudden departure, though explained by a vague family illness, did little to soothe Lydia's nascent suspicion. Instead, it fueled it. Why would Clara, her chief confidant and bridesmaid, abandon her during the frantic, joyful chaos of her engagement? James, meanwhile, had sunk into a state of profound, brittle despair. With Clara gone, the final buffer against his own wretched conscience vanished. He became colder, more distant, and his attempts at feigning romantic excitement for Lydia grew noticeably strained. The forced proximity of wedding planning meant to unite them only highlighted the unnatural distance between them. The breaking point arrived a week after Clara's retreat. Lydia had gone to James's townhouse unexpectedly, intending to surprise him with a final decision on the wedding cake design. She found him in his study, sitting at his vast mahogany desk, not attending to political papers, but staring blankly at a crumpled piece of parchment. He left the study briefly to answer a sharp rap at the door, leaving the parchment lying haphazardly on the blotter. Lydia discovers the truth, a found letter James wrote but never sent. Lydia, whose pride and vanity had been wounded by James's recent moodiness, approached the desk. Curiosity, sharpened by lingering suspicion, compelled her. The paper was folded once, revealing James's unmistakable, desperate hand. It was not a complete letter, but a fragmented, soul-wrenching draft, written in the aftermath of the library encounter. I am a ruined man, and I have ruined you. Every time I look at the color of her gown, I am haunted by the gray of yours. I made the respectable choice, the dutiful choice, and in doing so, I doomed us to this lifetime of silent agony. I should have chosen truth. I should have chosen you. I am coming undone now that you are gone. Forgive the cowardice of my first choice, Clara, for the depth of my despair now is testament to the truth of my heart, that it was always irrevocably yours. Lydia read the words, and the world fractured. The elegant script, the raw use of Clara's given name, the specific, agonizing regret, it was all there. She crumpled the paper, her breath hitching in a strangled gasp. This was not a flirtation. This was a confession of true heart. Her shock rapidly curdled into a blinding, searing rage. Her pride was not merely pricked, it was annihilated. She had not only been deceived, but her brilliant match, her ultimate social triumph, had been revealed as a consolation prize, a second-best choice. When James returned to the study, Lydia was standing by the desk, the crumpled letter held like a poisoned weapon in her trembling hand. Her face, usually so radiant, was pale and contorted by fury and devastation. "Lydia, what?" James began, seeing the paper. "The depth of my despair is testament to the truth of my heart, that it was always irrevocably yours," Lydia recited, her voice shaking with devastating control. She threw the paper at him. "How dare you? How dare you use my loyalty, my affection, my very future as a shield to hide your cowardice?" James looked at the letter, then at Lydia. The moment he had dreaded had arrived. The truth, in all its ugliness, was exposed. He did not deny it. He couldn't. "Lydia, I never meant to deceive you." "Silence!" she cried, the controlled veneer snapping. "This is not about your wretched conscience, James. This is about betrayal. Yours and hers." The full venom of her pain turned toward her friend. The friendship shatters. Lydia feels humiliated and betrayed by Clara. "Clara, my dearest, quiet, selfless Clara, all those evenings, all those confidences, she listened to my dreams, knowing all along she had captured your secret desire. She was the steady friend, the true one, standing in the shadows, waiting for me to exhaust you." Lydia's pride had been twisted into believing Clara's quiet strength was a mask for passive deception. The shame of being the second choice was unbearable, and she lashed out with the intent to inflict equal pain. She always pretended to be above the competition, but she stole your heart the moment she looked at you across that ballroom, and you were not even man enough to choose your passion. You chose me to appease society while dreaming of her. I am humiliated. I have been made a laughingstock to myself. James realized with crushing clarity that the wound he had inflicted was beyond repair. It was not just a broken engagement, it was the catastrophic destruction of two separate vital relationships. The confrontation ended with a decisive, painful finality. James, torn by guilt, ends the engagement with Lydia, scandalizing society. "Lydia," James said, his voice heavy with finality, "I am profoundly sorry for the dishonor I have brought to your name. You deserve a man who loves you wholly, without reservation. I cannot marry you. The engagement is ended. I shall inform the Gazette immediately and shoulder all the blame." Lydia did not argue. She was past tears, past rage. Only the cold, devastating certainty of her humiliation remained. She swept out of the room, leaving James alone with the ruins of his carefully constructed life. The news broke like a thunderclap across London. The season's most anticipated union had collapsed. The society gossips had a feast. Whispers of infidelity, accusations of a secret rivalry between the friends, and the ruin of the proud Viscount Wexley. James took full public responsibility, but the implied guilt, the shadow of betrayal's shadow, fell heavily on Clara. When the news reached the countryside, Clara read the curt, shocking announcement in the paper. The guilt that had driven her into self-imposed exile returned with a crushing weight. She had tried to escape the betrayal, but by leaving, she had inadvertently created the vacuum that allowed the truth to explode. She was the cause of the scandal. She had broken James's duty, and she had irrevocably destroyed her dearest friendship. Clara flees, unable to bear being the ruin of both friend and man. Without waiting for a single letter or explanation, she knew none could truly absolve her. Clara convinced her mother that a more permanent, distant relocation was necessary. She needed to disappear. She needed to let the scandal die, far from the light of London and far from the pain she had inflicted. She fled again. leaving behind the wreckage of her broken loyalty, her shattered friendship, and the man whose ill-fated choice had cost them everything. Part 6, Chapter 6, From Ashes to Hope. The Quiet Exile. 6 months melted away in the hushed, unassuming landscape of Hampshire. Clara and her mother, having traded the clamor of London for a small rented cottage, lived a life of deliberate obscurity. The season, the balls, the betrayal, and the scandalous fall of the Wexley engagement felt like events belonging to another century, another person. Months later, Clara, living quietly in the countryside, believes her love story lost. Clara embraced the solitude. She spent her days tending a small garden, reading, and walking the rolling green hills. This quiet, restorative time allowed her to process the magnitude of her sacrifice and the bitterness of her regret. The silence of the country was a balm to her soul, but it was also a persistent reminder of what she had lost, her dearest friend, and the impossible, forbidden love that had irrevocably altered her life. She believed the story of James Harrington was finished, a chapter closed by her own flight and the severity of the scandal she had left behind. She kept up a strained, formal correspondence with Lydia's family, but never with Lydia herself. The silence from her friend was the deepest wound. Clara knew the friendship was broken and that her role in London society was irretrievably ruined. She was in exile, paying the penance for a relationship that had never been allowed to fully bloom. Meanwhile, James Harrington had endured a different kind of exile. He faced the full brunt of London's scorn, his political ambitions temporarily derailed, his reputation tarnished. The scandal had been ruinous, but it had also been clarifying. Stripped of his advantageous match and his social standing, he was finally free of the expectations that had driven his original cowardly choice. He realized with a fierce, purifying clarity that he had chosen duty and ambition over his own true heart, and that his pride had cost him the only woman who ever truly saw him. He had faced his flaw, his weakness in facing society's expectations, and was determined to overcome it. He spent those months settling his affairs, confronting his family's disappointment with quiet dignity, and securing the freedom to pursue the one thing that mattered. He started his search quietly, methodically, utilizing resources his Viscount status still afforded him. His only goal was absolution and reconnection. One crisp afternoon in late winter, a solitary rider, clad in heavy wool and mud-splattered boots, stopped before the modest cottage. James finds her, confessing that he chose wrongly before, but will not do so again. Clara was pruning rose bushes, her hands dirtied, her hair slightly unbound. She looked up, and the sight of him, older, leaner, his face etched with a newfound determination that replaced his former brooding, jolted her to the core. "James," she breathed, dropping the shears. He dismounted and covered the distance between them in a few long strides. He stopped before her, but did not attempt to touch her. "Clara, I have searched for you relentlessly." His voice was low, resonating with a weariness that went deeper than travel. "You should not have," Clara managed, taking a step back. "Your presence here is improper. The scandal." "I do not care about the scandal," James cut her off, his eyes locking onto hers with the familiar, intense connection that had haunted them both. "I care only for the truth. 6 months of social ruin, 6 months of quiet agony, has taught me what a contemptible fool I was to choose a title over you." He spoke with an earnestness that brooked no argument. "I chose wrongly before. I bowed to convention, and I lost everything worth having. I will not make that mistake again. I am here to choose you, Clara. Not your social standing, not your influence, but you. Just you." Clara resists at first, still haunted by her broken friendship, but passion wins. Clara's heart ached with the confession she had waited a lifetime to hear, but her guilt over Lydia remained a profound barrier. "You speak too late," she said, tears gathering in her eyes. "You have ruined your life and mine, and you have destroyed my dearest friendship. I cannot, James. I cannot be the prize won from such terrible betrayal. Lydia, I cannot face what I have done to her." "You did nothing to her," James insisted, taking a step closer. "It was my choice, Clara. I forced you into silence, and I made a vow to the wrong woman. I am taking responsibility for the destruction I caused, but I will not apologize for the truth of my heart." He reached out, his hand finally closing around hers, the first touch they had shared in what felt like an eternity. The spark was immediate, undeniable. a fierce, white-hot reminder of the slow burn, forbidden yearning that had simmered for so long. "We have both been punished," he said softly, drawing her closer, their faces separated by the air they had been desperately needing to share. "We ran from the passion because we feared the ruin, but there is no ruin greater than living a lie. Let us build something true from the ashes." Clara, her selfless drive to sacrifice her own happiness, warred with the desperate love that had taken root the moment their eyes first met. She looked at his face, seeing the weariness, the sincerity, the passion, and she finally truly let go of her carefully constructed walls. She was tired of being the martyr, tired of the loneliness. "I love you, James," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And I you, Clara, now and always." He closed the final distance, and their kiss was not frantic or guilty, but profound, a passionate sealing of a bond that had been forged in defiance and pain. It was the choice they should have made from the start. Epilogue: Rebuilding. A month later, Clara and James marry quietly, rebuilding from betrayal. They were married in the small stone church near the cottage. There was no grand society spectacle, no glittering arrival, only the simple, deeply felt vows exchanged before a handful of witnesses. Their commitment was not to society, but to the truth they had finally chosen. James wrote to his family, stating his intentions, no longer seeking their approval, but their understanding. They returned to London, not seeking to reclaim their former social standing, but to build a new life rooted in honest affection. The whispers followed them, but they were no longer bound by them. They devoted their energy to James's quiet return to politics and to forging a private, fulfilling life together. As for Lydia, the break with her friend had been agonizing, but the humiliation of the broken engagement spurred her to make a different kind of choice. The shame, which had been her flaw of pride, was channeled into fierce independence. She refused to retreat entirely. Instead, she took her considerable wealth and charm and dedicated herself to social reform, surprising society by becoming a patron of the arts and an advocate for women's education. She chose a path where her brilliance could shine without the need for a man's title. Lydia, though estranged, finds her own path, showing that even broken bonds can leave room for healing. Years later, a small, elegantly penned note arrived at Clara's house. It was from Lydia. It contained no apology and no return to their former intimacy, but simply a note of quiet, polite acknowledgement of Clara's new life, coupled with an update on her own triumphant philanthropic endeavors. It was the final sign that the wounds were closing, not with forgiveness that restored the past, but with a respectful distance that allowed both women to embrace their own separate, hard-won futures. Clara and James had found their love in the ashes of scandal, and Lydia had found her purpose in the aftermath of betrayal, proving that even the most shattered bonds could pave the way for a deeper, more profound kind of hope. The end, from ashes to hope. And so the journey of Clara and James concludes. Thank you so much for listening. We hope this emotional journey through the glittering and tragic world of Victorian society swept you away. If this story of sacrifice, forbidden love, and second chances captured your heart, please like this video to show your support. Subscribe so you don't miss our next story. Comment below and tell us, which character's journey did you find the most compelling? Until next time.